And we are back with Mystic Fix. In part one, we met Matthew Ash McKernan and explored weirdcraft. And now we're going to look at inspiring creativity through magic with Astrea Taylor. Take a listen. Astrea Taylor, I'm so happy to have you here today on Mystic Fix. You are the author of Inspiring Creativity Through Magick, How to Ritualize Your Art and Attract the Creative Spirit with Llewellyn Publishers. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Julie. It's great to be here.
You bet. And so you are an eclectic pagan witch, also the author of Air Magic and Intuitive Witchcraft, and co-author of Modern Witchcraft with the Greek Gods. That really appealed to me. I'm a myth buff. I just love mythology, and there's so much wisdom in it. Let's talk about your book a little bit. How do you define the connection between creativity and magic?
Okay, well, I think there's a huge overlap. First of all, I think that we talk about arts, we talk about the crafts. That could mean either creativity or a magical practice. And, even there are certain words like inspiration and enchantment, charm. These words have these root kind of meanings in common. So I think that I'm a creative person. I'm a very spiritual person as well. And once I realized that I could overlap the two, I started getting a lot more out of my creativity. It was almost as if I turned the light on and I could kind of like see the past, like the processes and things that were going on. And that really helped me come through. And in fact, it helped me write my first full-length book ever. And that was 6 books ago.
That's
But
great.
yeah,
I think any artist knows that you're going to a different place mentally when you're creating, when you're feeling through something, you're channeling something. And yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, as I was growing up, I had a very traditional upbringing, I guess you could say, in the Episcopal Church. And I remember being maybe 12 or 13 and going on a church retreat. And they essentially taught us automatic writing on that retreat.
wow.
And that I took with me as a writer my whole life. Yeah. And so whether you want to say it's God or you want to say you're channeling something. So I'm with you, sister.
Yeah.
How does, from your point of view, how does incorporating magic enhance the artistic process?
Well, kind of like you're saying, and a lot of other artists have said, including writers like Elizabeth Gilbert, you just kind of get in this mindset where something else comes through. And a lot of times people can call it God, like you said. Sometimes people call it their higher self or their animistic self, their lower self, whatever it is. They could call it like some kind of external spirit that's guiding them. However you want to think of it, I think it's okay. And to really get in that process and that flow state is so wonderful. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about inspiration. It means to breathe into. And there's kind of the connotation that something is like breathing into you, breathing ideas and inspiration with the element of air, of course. And just kind of filling your mind with all this energy and all these ideas and excitement for it as well. So that's one aspect of it.
Great.
But then the second aspect really is kind of like when I figured out that I could create this ritual to get the creativity going and the creative spirit flowing into me, that's when things started to really get magical for me. And so a lot of times with rituals, we just do whatever works. You don't have to call the quarters. You don't have to cast a circle or anything like that, but using magical correspondences really helps.
Can
So
you explain what the ritual is that you use?
yeah, sure. So whenever I write, I use a certain number of different things. So I think of the elements. I think of music, especially using headphones for my music. And this is like very thematic music for whatever I'm writing. I also like to use incense or essential oils to help me just block out everything else that's going on. It just helps me get my mindset in the right frame of mind. I like to use a candle kind of as like a mirror to my own energy. I'm using energy, the candle is using energy. I like to use a few stones and herbs as well. And I have to have my beverage, whether it's a cup of coffee or a cup of herbal tea. It's just so magical to drink that in. And it also helps me stay hydrated through those long hours of creating.
Sure, sure. Now your book is full of many ideas, right? I mean, you've got all kinds of practices and exercises, and I was really intrigued. I would love to dive into this and see what I'm kind of curious to what I may already be doing, kind of
Yeah.
intuitively,
Mhm.
and what new stuff you can teach me here. You have spells as well. So you're really taking it from the witch side.
Yes, the magic is really hardcore. I feel like spells, they don't have to take a long time. They don't have to take a lot of intention or a lot of energy. Even just the slightest shift in your mindset is what you want. And that can take, 20 seconds, 10 seconds even. Of
Mhm.
course, there are ones that will last longer if you wish, but
And
yeah,
don't you think it's really all about intention, right? It's
yeah.
about what you want to make happen and putting your energy toward that. Yeah. So how do you address skeptics? Do you get a lot of pushback for what you
Well,
teach?
I guess that I believe everyone has their own take on everything. And mostly I just hope that other people would extend the same respect to me that I respect to that I have for them
Yeah.
in their own processes. Because really we're living in a world of personal gnosis, and there is a predominant, theology, way of thinking, way of believing about things. But I mean, that's basically a bell curve, and there's always going to be people on the edges of the bell curve. And I don't really get into discussions or arguments with people about that. I just kind of just leave and say, okay, you do your thing, I'll do mine.
Mhm. Now,
And then
now in our emails back and forth, you talked about being inspired by Hilma of Klint.
Mhm.
And I looked her up. That's Klint. And I looked her up. She's a Swedish artist and mystic, kind of turn of the century, considered one of the first abstract artists that really surprised me, like before Kandinsky and I was just reading a little bit about her, inspired by Theosophy and Madame Blavatsky and seances and Spiritism, which was very big around the turn of the century. And Rudolf Steiner, who is a philosopher and spiritualist that I've given a lot of study to. Tell me how Hilma of Klint informed your work.
Well, when you hear that somebody else has a similar process as you do, it really reinforces the fact that, you're not alone in this, and that maybe you're onto something kind of clever or interesting or helpful. And so, yes, she was this artist and she channeled this spirit and this spiritual energy, maybe several spirits, to create this beautiful, transcendent, strange, abstract art, as you said. And it was so not of its time. She was so ahead of her time. I just saw the movie last week with
Mhm.
my best friend, and it was amazing. It blew me away. I highly recommend, if you can see the movie Hilma, do it. But
Okay.
yeah, so she really just kind of provided this template for, here's how I do things, here's what I think of things, and here's how it comes through for me. And she actually had two different periods, at least, where she let the spirit come through 100%, and she dialed it back and let the spirit come through and her own self come through as well. So
Hmm.
I think that there is a dial we can tune to say, like, what do you want to come through? Like, do you want it to go 100? Do you want to go lesser? And I talk about that a little bit in the book as well, just experimenting with the creative spirit and what actually does come through.
So do you think it can be too much? Like, are there precautions that you would give?
Yeah, I have a section in the book about banishing bad spirits and how to know if the creative spirit, quote unquote, that you may be working with is actually a bad spirit. Like if they're asking you for favors, if they're telling you things that aren't true, or hyperbolic things that are just too good to be true, then it's probably a bad spirit. If you feel drained, super drained after working with them, then it's probably a bad spirit. I highly recommend having protection in place, having a warded place. If you are very sensitive, or you're very new, you may want to actually do that casting of a circle, as we talked about earlier, just to keep yourself safe. And I think it's wise to think about those things. And as far as like how much things come through, I do think it can be too much. I think that, you know, what my experiences have taught me is that, it can be a very cathartic experience when that happens, but it's not necessarily good. Sometimes it's just an experience. I get that
Uh-huh.
more when I'm fire dancing as opposed to writing. When I'm writing, there is much of me and there's much of the spirit. But dancing, it can be like something has taken over and you don't want to let that go to excesses. So having someone there checking on you, making sure you're staying hydrated, making sure you're not
Yeah.
overdoing it. Those are all very important things, as is
They-
a grounding practice afterward.
Yeah, there are experienced junkies, aren't there? Like some people
Yeah.
just want to be so intense and so on the edge. And yeah. I think a lot of times artists are very into collaboration and community. And how does that fit in with working with magic? Is there an intersection for that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I definitely think so. I think that you can all set a group intention and work on something together. You can set separate intentions and work on them separately, but kind of having that support, that energy, it's kind of like having the candle flame there. It's kind of like someone's making sure you're doing the work, making sure you're staying accountable to it, making sure you're putting the time and not just spacing out or just dreaming about things or just thinking about things, which is a great problem that a lot of artists have when they're starting out.
Mm,
So it really grounds the practice, the community does, to help you get through to get a finished product too. And my husband and I, he's an artist, he's a musician, and I'm, a writer and a fire dancer. We actually put in time separately, and then we come back together and rest and eat food. But I'm like, what are you doing? What are you going to work on? And he asks me the same thing. He's like, what are you going to accomplish? Are you going to finish that chapter? So
yeah.
having goals, bouncing them off each other is a way to just get that resonance perfect.
Nice. Estrella, what would you like our viewers and listeners to take away as far as expectations for your book? What do you want your book to do?
Well, I have to make a confession about this because I used to have a problem completing my art or prioritizing myself and my own art. And you wouldn't think of that with everything I've accomplished, but
Sure.
I mean, I blame some of that on my ADHD, but some of it was just like not prioritizing myself. So if you want to prioritize your art, this is a great book for that. And also, if you want to learn how to hyper focus by making a ritual for your creativity, this is the perfect book for that. It'll help you dial in what helps you and kind of block out what doesn't help you. And then it kind of gives you a way to kind of conceptualize the whole art. We work with this idea of the art or the spirit of the art, which is the egregore. It's kind of a common thought form of a thing. I give the example like there's a thought form of coffee, an egregore of coffee. Everyone knows what that spirit is like. And your art has an egregore as well. And you just have to get to know it and really kind of help it get fleshed out. So
Yeah,
it's
nice.
exciting. Like I encourage everyone to undergo the creative process, even if they have doubts about themselves, because I wouldn't be here sharing this with you if I hadn't undergone that journey.
Fantastic. And I'm so excited that one of our listeners or viewers, depending on which way they catch us, podcast or radio or video cast, will get a free copy of your book from Llewellyn Publishers. Estrella, how can people reach you if they wanted to connect?
The best way to reach me is on my webpage, AstreaTaylor.com, where I have books for sale and other offerings, as well as a few freebies. I also have an Instagram page at AstreaTaylor.com. Those are the best.
And we'll just spell Astrea, Astrea. Yeah,
Yes.
and Taylor, yeah, the traditional way. Thank you so much. It was really wonderful to meet you, and have a great evening.
Thanks. I hope you do too. Thanks, everyone.
Take care. That was Astrea Taylor, Inspiring Creativity Through Magick. Stay tuned for part 3 of Mystic Fix when we return with tarot card readings.